Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Players Championship in 2016. I'm here with the 2014 Players Champion, Brad Nelson. Now, you squeaked in.
I did, last minute.
You know, you crushed the Season 2 Invitational. You figured we could make a run. You did. You're here, and you're playing a green-black deck, but not a green-black deck like the Open in Knoxville you won.
Yeah, I'm not playing Delirium. It's an old take from a deck that I previously played in this format after the Pro Tour. Moved over to Delirium. Didn't think that was going to be a good metagame call, so went back to a deck that actually just seems like one of the better choices given my expected metagame.
Right, and we saw this deck pop up right after the Pro Tour. I think Eric Froeg was playing it. You played it online, top 8 of Mox, I believe, with it. And then at the last Invitational, we saw Adam Snook play a very similar deck to this. This is not, mid-rangey messing around. This is a beatdown deck.
Yes, it is. It's more of a ramp deck. It's like a I don't really know how to describe it, but it's got copter draws, it's got like Grimflare draws, but it has 8 mana creatures, and then it has either Kalitas or Gearhulk for your 5-drop. And I say 5-drop for Kalitas because you either want to hold up a Blossoming Defense or have one of your many 1-mana removal spells to kill something to then generate a zombie.
All right, well, let's take us into the deck here. We're going to start off with a bunch of creatures. This is what you're really trying to do here. Verdur's Gearhulk is kind of like the highlight of this deck. This is the card you're ramping into, so to speak, with your beatdown, but also your mana creature here with the Servant. And Blossoming Defense, a card that you started out the standard season at the very first Open playing in a green-white deck, I believe.
Smuggler's Copter, because Smuggler's Copter is not a creature when it comes into play, you have that entire free window where your opponent can't interact with the spell unless they have like an enchantment or an artifact removal, which isn't that good. So then when you untap, you're able to either defensively block with it or attack with it with defense up. And all these unlicensed Disintegration Mardu decks, like if you want to block with this on turn 3, if you play like a Servant on turn 3 to crew, and they just spend their entire turn casting unlicensed Disintegration, and you not only protect your Copter but kill theirs in as well, like the game is almost over completely.
Right.
But Verdur's Gearhulk, the reason that I'm playing this card is it gives me the ability to actually race or put pressure on Mardu decks, but also that the reason that this deck, or at least I chose to not play it anymore, was because Blue-White Flash was built with 4 Selfless Spirits and 4 Absents, and now that they're moving away from that and they're moving way more aggressive to fight Marvel, they don't have the big cards that screw up my plan, because like in Ishkanai you can just sit back with Delirium and just drain them or just play a really long game until you find Emrakul. But this deck has to attack, and you're eventually going to attack into an indestructible board, or they're just going to start attacking you in the air. So once those cards moved away, I thought that this deck would become really well positioned. Right,
and attacking you'll do as we move on to the next slide. We're going to see a bunch more creatures here. You're playing Smuggler's Copter, of course, but Grimflare is probably just the ideal 2-drop here. You see it in the Delirium decks and the beatdown decks, just to how big it can get. And then you got Gnarlwood Dryad as well to kind of start the curve and also be a pseudo removal spell.
Yeah, this is just a way to have something that crews Copter, but also is a great spell to play on turn 1 on the draw against any Scrypeat Scrounger deck.
Okay, Copter, great. We know that. Flare. Now, how are you turning on Delirium in this deck, or are you not so concerned about it? Because this isn't a grapple,
No.
all that kind of stuff.
No, we've got 2 Deadweights for enchantments, 2 sorceries with Traverse, 8 artifacts, a bunch of creatures, and then instants and land. So we don't have, and 1 Planeswalker. So we have a lot of types, but not many of them. But getting to Delirium isn't the most important. It's just kind of a mid-range, like once you start attacking. But even if you can't attack with Grimflare for the first time with Delirium, you have Gearhulk token or counters to put on and just push through like 6 damage, get the trample to turn the Grimflare on. It's the ability when you're attacking that's more relevant, is to like sift through your deck, find the best card in your top 3 to continue a certain game plan.
Right, and I think it's important to note you got Flare with Trample and Verdur's Gearhulk with Trample. With the Blossoming Defense can kind of really push in a lot of damage.
Yes, this deck turns the corner really quickly, and sometimes it's just gets on the board faster than decks like Mardu or Blue-White Flash.
Okay, let's keep moving on through the cards here. We're going to see Kalitas, the real all-star of the deck. You say you want to play on 5, so you can kind of protect and do your things with it. And then Catacomb Sifter here is the other card that's kind of really allows you to churn through your deck.
Yeah, so there was... We thought about playing Mind Rack Demon like Snook did, but the problem with Mind Rack Demon is to make sure that you hit Delirium, you want to play Scrap Heap Scrounger, but that didn't seem like the kind of card we wanted to play in this format because it feels like people are going to be more aggressive or playing Aetherworks. It was a really weird metagame when Black-Green Delirium doesn't look like a good choice, and only 3 of us have ever played it. So it's actually makes a lot of sense for me to play a variant of Black-Green that plays a lot of the same spells that are good for the metagame, but to diversify my strategy so I don't just like lose to all the Thalias people are going to be playing to deal with the Ishkanahs that are in Marvel decks anyway. So Cletus is actually probably very well positioned outside of the Marvel matchups for this tournament because people are going to be playing Spellquill or aggressive decks. I mean, Kevin Jones is in the tournament, so there's at least one. But so the card is actually really good against Mardu, and I think Mardu is the safest standard choice. Anyone that's like, I don't know how to win this tournament with standard, is probably going to play Mardu because it's just such a good and safe choice. And this is one of the major cards that gives us a good matchup. If we didn't have this many Cletus, it'd make the games a whole lot more difficult. But Catacomb Sifter is great in this deck just because nothing's changed for it. It's played on turn 3 and can crew, and then on turn 4, you can not only crew your Copter with the Scion, but you can also sack it for Gear Hulk. So then you can get like a huge chunk of damage. I mean, it's 9 damage coming in on turn 4, and that means that you have 13 power in play still. So they might be at 8 with 13 power they're staring at on turn 4. Like, sure, play your Gideon. Like,
yeah, that was a card that really kind of put Snook over the top and really allowed him to get the fast wins that deck needed, in Atlanta. You also got Traverse here, which, most of the time is finding you a basic land, but late game can often find you one of these threats.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hit Delirium that often. Sometimes it just enables it. It's just you don't want to play more lands so that you can have more types. And it does find you. It's a dual land in the sense that like on turn 1, if you have a forest and a swamp and a traverse, it's not clear which land you actually want. Like a Delirium deck, a normal Delirium deck wants a swamp all the time because of Grass Liliana. But sometimes you're going to have to play like Grimflare plus Hold Up, Blossoming Defense, or after Cyborg Natural State. So it's pretty good in this deck, but we did cut one. The deck used to play only 23 lands, but I upped it because with aggression, I definitely just want to make sure I hit all my land drops, and I'll cycle them if I need to with Copter.
Yeah, one thing Brad Nelson does is usually up the land count. If you pay attention to the Players' Championship decks you've played, going back to Sultai Reanimator, you up the land count. So we'll keep moving on here. You're going to have a bunch of removal spells, 3 Grasp of Darkness, 2 Deadweight, and then only 1 Liliana. This is the interesting choice here in the deck, I think.
Well, so I wanted to definitely play 2 Deadweights because that's going to help out with Delirium, but I also, like I said earlier, every deck is built to beat Ishkanah right now, all the aggressive decks, and they're all playing a high number of Thalias. So Thalia can do a lot of damage to this deck, but it's still like, if you're being on the aggressive foot, all your cards come with an ability that's not that big for that turn. Like if they have a Thalia, great, I can still just play Gear Hulk, get the ability for that turn. I might not block, but so it's not the worst thing in the world, but just having a nice efficient removal spell for these aggressive draws with Toolcraft Exemplar and stuff like that. Liliana at 1 is because it's not that good in this format. I just have it and the 1 in the board just so decks with Selfless Spirit and Avacyn after sideboard respect it.
Sure.
And these vehicle decks are going to have to respect it, maybe not play as many X1s, because if they have an X1 draw and I draw one of my 2 Lilianas, the game's over. And that's one of the weird things about deck lists, is that you have to play enough things so that they have to respect them.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter, what I've learned about these tournaments, it doesn't matter what you have, it's what you don't have. Once you know what your opponents don't have, they play around things. And because they know that they don't have to play around X. So you at least have to cover all your bases and be very powerful and use their information against them.
Yeah, you got to keep them honest.
Yes.
All right, so we'll keep moving on here. We're going to see your lands, which I think we've all kind of grown to expect at this point. You have, creature lands and the dual lands for this mana base, along with Evolving Wilds.
I'm not playing this Evolving Wilds though. It's a different one.
Okay. You have the different art.
Can we change that?
All right, we'll fix it in post.
Okay.
But we'll keep moving on. We'll see the rest of your lands. You got a bunch of basic lands. Move into this.
I don't even use these ones either.
Hey, at least last year we had just half art M14 or something. So we're going to accept the full art lands. Let's move on to the sideboard, where we're going to see Transgress the Mind, Natural State, Fleetwheel Cruiser. This is the question mark I have here.
Is that not normal? Is that not stock?
I mean, I have not seen a lot of Fleet Wheel Cruisers in the
No?
black-green decks. Of course, this is going back to early season.
Yeah.
So take us through the vehicle suite. You know, you have some more on another page, and we'll hit these kind of more sideboard-centric cards here in a minute.
All right. Well, Fleet Wheel Cruiser is in the deck to give us a faster clock, a more consistent clock against Marvel decks. There's a lot of games where a Gearhulk or a Cruiser is lethal, like a second Gearhulk or the first Cruiser is going to be lethal. It's also just something that you can start pressuring them with pre-Ishkanah, and then maybe get some counters on it. Also, this deck has cards like Servant and Catacomb Sifter that lose value as the game goes on. And so, like, giving these cards more value in these matchups is relevant to me, just to make sure that you don't just keep drawing Grizzly Bears that attack. And especially because against Marvel, the strategy is to, like, try to transgress them and hit something or put a lot of pressure on them. The games are so volatile that, like, you can transgress them and keep your game plan, or you cannot, and sometimes they don't get there, or you can transgress them and they get there, and it doesn't matter. Like, I just wanted to make sure that I had the fastest clock possible, and that's what Fleet Wheel Cruiser is giving me.
Okay, next page. We're also going to see the Skyship here as your second vehicle.
That's my favorite card on the sideboard.
Right, so you're going to have a bunch of these like Catacomb Sifters and the Conduits kind of sitting around, and then you can crew them up later in the game.
Yep. Do we have them?
We should have the next slide, yes.
There it is.
The beautiful flagship.
So, the reason that I'm playing this card is because any Flash variant hates to play against this card. Now, I threw away this deck when I couldn't beat Flash back in the day, but I didn't know how good Sky Sovereign was against it. And so, like, when you play that matchup, I guess this comes out once we start playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Kalitas or any other 4-drop is terrible against Reflector Mage Spellcaller decks because it's the most amount of mana that you can invest, and they still get you know, a great rate out of their cards. So after sideboard, I just have Gearhulks and Sky Sovereigns that can't be rebuffed, that can't be Spellcaller, that sure, Reflector Mage my Gearhulk. Like,
yeah.
You know, that sucks. But, like, Sky Sovereign is so good when they're spending all their time trying to, like, out-tempo you in the first 4 turns, because it just comes down and kills a creature. Now it can block something big. It can deal with a Gideon. It's just phenomenal in that matchup, and was... it took me a long time to figure out that Ishkanah is no longer good, because it was good about a month ago or six weeks ago when I was playing this deck, but now all of the white Copter decks have figured out how to beat Ishkanah. They had to. They at least have to have a game plan, and which makes Ishkanah not good anymore. And it took me... I sat at a computer screen playing against my brother for like 7 hours before I realized that Ishkanah was bad.
All right.
Yeah, it took forever. But yeah, another deadweight for Thalia and aggressive things, and another Liliana to keep them honest.
All right, and that pretty much makes up the deck. So what did you think the metagame was going to be going into the tournament that kind of led you to this? I think Marvel, you mentioned, is the kind of the big deck to beat. No, it's not the big deck. I actually think that it's really poorly positioned, but about 3 people will stick to it. Because there's only 3 people that play Black-Green Delirium, which it preys on. And that's only 3 people that have played Black-Green Delirium. It's not even... The whole field hasn't. And so if you think all 3 of those people are going to be on it, Marvel still doesn't even look like that good of a call, because Mardu and... Like, Mardu's got a pretty even matchup against it, a little bit favored. But then, like, the Esper Aggro deck, which Jim top-4'd the Invitational with, is really good. And so it's at least very good against Marvel. So there's just too much fear. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of it. What I do think there's going to be a lot of is white-based aggressive decks. I think Mardu or aggressively scented Spellcaller decks are going to make up most of the decks with, you know, there could be a couple outliers. Like, I could see Joe Lisette coming with Jeskai Control or something. But for the most part, I would be shocked if there's more than 1 Black-Green Delirium, actual Black-Green Delirium deck, and more than 3 Marvels. And I mean, if the white aggressive decks don't show up, then I should have just played one. But but I built this to be as good against the whole field, but also really focused on those decks. I'm very good against Spellcaller, and Mardu is close, but I think that's just a product of Mardu and not this deck. Mardu is just close against everything. But so that's what I'm hoping shows up. All right, your 3rd straight Players Championship. Yeah. You always kind of solve the metagame coming into it. Oh, this one, there's a reason why we're not talking about the other 2 formats. But this one maybe. I do not feel good in the other 2. All right, well, we wish you the best of luck. I know you're trying to go for another title here. You worked with Todd Anderson. Your decks look good this weekend, so best of luck. Thank you.